All right, let's go. All right, let's go.
Well, I'm super excited about this episode. I've known Lance now for a number of years, but I've known who you are and kind of the path you've been on long before I ever met you, right? And in my humble opinion, Lance, you are one of the preeminent, if not the originator for me of LTL technologist, right? And you started this probably in the 90s, right? You've been doing this for 20 years. And to me, you're kind of the godfather of APIs. I don't want to get in trouble for that or anything. And we can laugh about that. But, right, I think you started that out of necessity. It was like a happy accident.
Yeah, no, we was poor and destitute, and it's doing a startup, and honestly, couldn't afford the SMC3 licenses at the time, so we had one technology guy and said, okay, hey, let's just go out and start screen scraping websites for the carriers in the late 90s, and then he said, there's this really cool new API technology. Let's use that. And so we did, just build it for our own use. And then a bunch of our customers, because we were I was in construction materials. So it was for this exchange. And then a bunch of our customers were like, holy crap, how'd you do that? We're like, we just built a thing. And then
I think some of the best companies come out of those happy accidents like that. But, fast forward now, you've got 25 plus years in the LTL technology space. You've been with, 3 different companies. You've got some U.S. patents out there. But now you're on to FreightFacts, right? And I think you just launched your new shipper scorecard platform, I think this month.
Yeah, like just this week, actually. So we're pre-registering shippers, but the idea around it is everybody rates their carriers, right? Everybody has a scorecard for the carriers. And this is kind of the mirror piece where we're actually creating scorecards on shippers. And it's about 24 different factors. But things like dwell time, damage claims as a percentage, accessorials, days to pay, a lot of the behavioral things, critical behavioral things that affect your rates with carriers, nobody ever tracks. And so it's kind of learned by doing, or, there's really no way to adjust. Are we getting better or worse? It's a lot of anecdotes and whatnot. So it's kind of the same concept of the banks coming together to create like a FICO Score and lending institutions. And now there's no bank that's going to lend you money or offer credit if you're not getting if they can't check your credit score first. And so we're looking at the same thing as why in the LTL industry do we offer pricing by going, damn, Bobby, you look good. Here's some pricing.
We'll figure freight. That's square stuff.
Yeah, well, you told me it's heavy and your docks are open till 6 and there's no accessorials. So, it's all the things that the industry, we try to collect, from sales reps or whatever, but customers don't know half the stuff, or on some occasions they just outright lie. And so there's this accountability.
Shippers never lie, Lance.
I'm glad you were sitting, brother, because that was important. But it's just a way to, hey, here's some common metrics that we can build on as an industry to be accountable for.
I love that because I do a lot of customer events with carriers. We'll do like terminal lunch and learns. And that's one of the educational pieces I give them is like, hey guys, you realize when that carrier bumps your dock, like you're on the clock. And if you're asking him to pro your freight and do some of the work that you should be doing, that's hitting your costing, right? But there's so much more beyond just the driver time, which is why I love what you're doing. And we've seen this for years, right? Shippers heavily grade carriers, right? And that's why Mastio's out there and Kevin does a great job ranking the carriers. And I think the reason I love FreightFacts is because that's been devoid for the longest time on the other side. And it's really important for shippers to know you're getting graded too. And why I love it, Lance, is shipper of choice has been a term that's loosely thrown out there for many a year. But I think if you can take what you're doing and marrying that up with real data, then we can separate fact from fiction.
Yeah. And I'm going to challenge you on just the shipper of choice too, because shipper of choice is good. And that's a great starting point. But what it shocks me, a lot of shippers are surprised to hear that their docs are only 50% of every shipment.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's coming from somewhere or going to somewhere, and you're paying for those operations on your suppliers or your customers, and you have no visibility, you have no accountability. It's this massive blind spot. And shippers are like, but my docs are very good. And I was like, aren't you pretty? Yes, but it's that visibility to become like a network of choice, not just a shipper of choice.
Yep.
And it's a big deal. And a lot of shippers don't realize it till they show up at the negotiating table and we're like, my docs are awesome. And then the carriers are like, yeah, they are. Thank you. But let's talk about your vendors. Let's talk about your customers that you're offering free freight to. There's probably a good percentage of those on either side that should be kicked off your tariff immediately.
Yeah. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. And I think I really see a change in the industry. And I think for the longest time when we came up, right, it was all like, well, I have a lot of volume, so I have a lot of buying power. But with the carriers getting a lot smarter and getting a lot better technology and tools to measure, that's changing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And it has to, the volume play, you're exactly right. That was the 90s, early 2000s. Do you know how big I am? And then we watched the carriers start like killing contracts when capacity got tight. And it was the biggest customers that they were like, you know what, we're just not going to renew because we're making more money off the SMB guys.
Amen. And there's a huge focus on that SMB too now. Yeah.
And it's critical. But those SMB guys are also, they're wearing 12 hats. Most companies barely understand transportation if they're in manufacturing, distribution, whatnot, but they can barely spell LTL, outside of their logistics management, team. But when you get into the C-suite, they have no concept of it, but they can understand a freight score. Yeah. Like, why do our rates suck? Well, we have a lousy freight score. Okay, well, how do we get it? How do we get it better?
Yeah. No different than a credit score, right? My wife helps people buy homes. She's a loan officer. And I have to hear her talking all the time when they have a lower credit score. How do you get it up? How are you able to purchase the home, right? So I love that we're going down this path. Now, when you built APIs, 20-something years ago, the industry probably thought you were crazy. Like some people think you're crazy now trying to get your hands on this data. But what's funny about that is API are just table stakes now. And they're finally kind of becoming first-class citizens in this industry and getting a lot more attention than they ever had, right? So, like, what do you think the equivalent blind spot is in LTL right now, right? To when you started that. What do you think is an equivalent blind spot today?
Oh man, I mean, AI is right there, for sure. Yes, I'm getting a lot of pushback and on shipper scorecards, and surprisingly from some of the carriers. APIs, were disrupting static rate tables and maintaining rate tables. They were horrible. It was a horrible practice, but it was known and accepted. And right now, part of what we're disrupting is we learn how to operate on that customer over time. So, AKA, we lose a lot of money for several months until we figure out, how they actually operate. It's not a competitive advantage for anybody. It's just a bad process that's pervasive across the industry. So people are coming around. People will come around. You don't want to be the last bank that's offering credit without checking credit reports. It's not good.
And I really like how you just laid that out. And I think that's a really awesome kind of take to have on this, because you're right. And I've heard this before from carriers where they're like, hey, protect the eggs in your basket because getting net new accounts is too hard, or what you just mentioned. We lose money for a period of time until we figure it out. But it's because there's a gray area there that exists today that doesn't have to.
No. And, you know, and it's, like I said, it's not any one competitive advantage for any carrier. It's, hey, if we as an industry come together, we can all be more efficient. And what I think the really cool piece that I'm hoping for is when manufacturers, distributors, retailers start holding their vendors and, hey, you've got to be at least a 500, and just, we borrowed liberally from the credit agency, you know, 780 good, you know, 340 bad, you know, kind of deal. But, you know, if your suppliers are below a certain level and you start saying, hey, you're on a PPI, you know, or a PIP, sorry. You know, that I'm going to start to, you know, track your performance because you're affecting my ability to work with my carriers. When we start to see that peer pressure, you're going to see that rising tide for all boats. Yes. And now we're all slaves to our credit scores, just like your wife's customers. And you know, we all care about what our credit score is. And my hope and wish is that someday very soon, we're all going to care about what our shipper score is.
No, I can't wait until it's more known and even more visible and prevalent, right? And right now you're pushing a rock uphill, but I can't wait till you get to that tipping point and it starts gaining some real momentum. So I kind of want to segue here, right? Because another thing you were heavily involved in early, and again, I love that you're a pioneer in so much of this, is kind of dynamic pricing, right?
Yeah.
And you've done a lot of work with that, and we're kind of an early pusher and believer in that, right? But I think you kind of realize dynamic pricing's not really enough, and that's why it kind of led you to FreightFacts, because the carrier, right? Hey, what lane we need, what weight, right? Whether the shipper's sending freight that the customer actually wanted. There was a gap there that became FreightFacts. So kind of walk me through the insight. What did you see in the data that nobody else saw?
Yeah, it was as we started to look at, you know, it's in like 2017, we got a patent on it for dynamic pricing, but it was when, you know, I was at Banyan, and that was just the wrong vehicle because we weren't really facing the carriers. So went in with Optum, who's like building the back end operating systems and the line haul coordination stuff. And that's really where I think it has the most bang for the buck. Is I can see when somebody's line haul is 2,500 pounds short of a direct point. So you can use dynamic pricing to lower weights between those two terminal service coverage areas through your APIs in real time. And I can match on weight class and zip codes, but I can't match on, oh crap, they got a 60-minute dwell time and they've got appointment, and they've got sort and seg, or whatever else. So you're trying to fill that to get that direct point instead of that break bulk with the most efficient freight possible, because I already know it's efficient freight, so I can offer a discount and then make every lane in that for that truck, for that line haul more profitable. So that's the idea in the win. But until we have a scoring system that starts to speak to all of those other little subtle nuances, dynamic pricing is kind of constrained in terms of how intelligent it can be, unless you're creating metrics for every single one of those attributes, which is something we tried to do, but it's way overbearing and a ton of overhead trying to do anything like that. So capturing in a score, I got a pretty good idea. I'm not going to offer this discount unless you're above a 600 or a 700 on your shipper score. So,
and I think as more carriers adopt the dynamic pricing, right, and that becomes the preeminent pricing that's offered to customers, and then you could couple in FreightFacts to figure out, hey, this is a good shipper, right? So I probably have better costing, thus lower OR. So it's an ideal customer. And my hope is that the dynamic pricing as it evolves, or whatever you want to call it, cube pricing, dim weight pricing, that really brings more of that pricing neutrality to where intermediaries or 3PLs have the same pricing that a direct shipper can have. So they have to change their value proposition, right?
100%.
And the LTL carriers are able to actually compete better and empower their local sales. And I see that going. I also see a gap in dynamic pricing where it's hard to really continue to discount multi-bill shippers as they give you more freight. And I think that's a gap that has to be cleared today.
Yeah, I know how to do that. I can tell you, I can tell anybody how to do that on your show right now. Pretty easy. In terms of saying, 26% of a pickup cost is lost in that first pickup, okay, we bump the dock. So incentivizing that and capturing to incentivize getting more shipments on that as your API rating throughout the day is pretty simple. It just hasn't been implemented well. But it's very, very accessible, very available. I don't have a dog in that race anymore. But yeah, we did that almost 10 years ago now.
I want to get back to your FICO analogy, right? Because I really like that, right? And you described FreightFacts as that kind of FICO score for LTL shippers. And we all know that changed the consumer lending game, right? Because as you alluded to, I can't go buy a car without them judging me based on that. And that determines the interest rate I get or the discount you get more or less in LTL. So for all this work to happen, you have to get your hands on that data. And I'm so curious on the methodology here, or how do you work to get competing carriers who don't want to share data to furnish that data to generate this score? Because I do believe, like you said, a rising tide lifts all boats. That's a tough spot for you to be in.
Yes. Yeah, it is. And this is why it's the technology to build what we're doing very easy. Dealing with the legal and getting people comfortable with data. I'll tell you, when we first started, I was like, oh, okay, I'll just tell the carriers this is what we're doing. They're just going to give us all the data. It'll be totally cool. And then we'll just release the data as shippers sign up. And a lot of the carriers just went, no. And certainly I totally respect that, because they were like, hey, we're going to get sued if we share data outside of our customers. And they were citing things like, the 49, the U.S. Surface Transportation Statutes 14908 about data sharing, and which is super outdated and specific and whatever. But
there's outdated stuff in LTL. Get out of here.
I know. And the fact that it was a maritime law, but it just got carried over, but whatever. So we really had to address a lot of that. And so all of our, just like a credit report with a bank, all of our, any data that is to be released has to be initiated by the shipper, whoever the account owner is. So if it's a 3PL, whoever owns that relationship with the carrier. And that way and carriers are absolved of all sins and says, yes, it's just like a LOA, honestly.
That's what I was going to say. Like, the shipper executes the permission for you to feed that in. But what's your plan to scale that? Because like at my carrier, right, we have our hands on a lot of data, can trend a lot of data, can see OD pairs, commodity information, the aggregation, pricing discrepancies in the market. And it's easier for me to obtain only because the shippers are inputting that, right? As where you're having to go shipper by shipper. Explain to me that process and how you're working.
Yeah, essentially we have just a one-time integration from the carriers, and that gets automated. So we'll get a nightly dump of like settled transactions for this account number for the shipper that signs up. Hey, here's their account number. So every night as shippers, sign up and register, the carriers are able to add new account numbers. Or if a shipper says, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, remove it from what generates the export file to us. And then it just dumps it over to us. And then we're able to aggregate it, anonymize it from all the carriers. And we won't show data unless there's at least 3 carriers participating. So it's all, you can't really see. I'm not calling anybody out. And then it's just score data. So you can't dig into it and see, okay, well, I want to see all the shipment data. None of that is ever visible to anybody. And we don't collect pricing data. We don't collect product data. We don't collect contact information. So we're good on all the privacy stuff and GDPR and all that fun thing. So Yeah. So that's the way the process works. And then, I'm an API guy. So we have a web interface. We've got the ability, you can pull down reports and print them out or whatever, but you can also, just pull it like a soft pull and a hard pull from getting hey, I'm building a shipment in your TMS and you want to be able to get a freight score. You can do soft pulls and just see, oh, hey, this one's a 430. Okay. I want to get the details of that report to find out why are they a 430. So it's meant to be really ingested where it's going to have the most sense and the most value for whoever's using it. So whether it's shippers or 3PLs or carriers.
Now, I find one of the biggest challenges just in working with data in general, especially when you're consuming multiple sources of different types or categories of data across different partners or vendors, is normalizing that data, right? Tell me about some of the challenges with that and how you kind of have to be like a translation layer to get that into somewhat of a human digestible format to even calculate a score.
Yeah, it's absolutely. And that's why we're really constrained to about 24 data points right now. We already asked for carriers about adding more things and what about this or that. And I'm like, can you give me that data in a consistent format? They're like, no. And I'm like, okay, then that's not on the list. But these are good, solid metrics and operational metrics and stuff that we can work with today. So they're not, yes, there's a little variation in format, whatever, but the beauty of us starting in the LTL market is that there's only, I can get 30 LTL carriers and I've got well over, 95% of the market share. So, so there's not even if we have to do custom imports for each one or tweak each one a little bit, we're happy taking that on. If we need to tweak, okay, you give me a T and F instead of a Y and an N, or a 1 and a 0. That's fine. We'll make it easy on them. But one of the other fun pieces that we are offering to carriers is, and only the carriers, the contributing carriers, is they're able to get to see relative performance as well. So they can go at an account specific level and say, hey, I'm getting paid in 60 days. And the industry average from all of the other LTL carriers is getting paid in 36. Maybe I want to have a conversation. We're gonna have a discussion. Or hey, my dwell times at this location are better than the average. That's great. Extra box of donuts. That kind of thing. So but they're able to see, for the very first time, very keen relative performance that they don't have any visibility to today. Yeah.
Now, this is something I'm bullish on is fully digitizing the life cycle of the shipment, right? So that we can really take a fragmented SMB market and make it highly efficient for the LTL carriers. And I think we've done a really good job up front with that, all the way to the dispatch modality, getting that into their system, driving e-bill of lading. But what you just hit on, there's a lot, and I don't think a lot of shippers see this, is how much time to task activities or how much labor goes into receiving and applying the cash, not to mention the DSO gaps that are created. So, like, as you start to amass data, is there any cool fun facts? Like, we're both freight nerds. Was there some stuff in there that, like, really surprised you or anything that, like, hot dang?
Bill of ladings. Honestly, how many people are still using manual bill of ladings? Oh, I want to stab myself in the neck. Like, honestly, and, are just folks that want to do RFPs and not provide address data. That just blows me away.
It's wild when you receive an RFP that's like, we'll call it less than desirable, but it's like, tell me you don't know how to submit an RFP without telling.
And that's one of the tools that we looked at is so you can drag like a 5,000, 10,000 line RFP in into FreightFacts.
Mm-hmm.
And if there's address data, I'll give you a location score on every address in there.
Yeah.
So imagine from an analyst perspective, being able to see, okay, now I'm going to sort by, I could look at frequency at location, but now I can sort by their shipper score.
Yeah.
I'm like, holy crap, I'm just reducing my time and risk on analytics on that, substantially. Yeah. So I'm thinking, from a carrier's pricing team, from a 3PL's team, looking at the same thing, but how to better qualify those, the whole network and how that shows up in a carrier's to the carriers is important. So.
And what I love about this is what you've really done is taken like a VIX, right? Like a vendor inbound compliance type of scorecarding, which everybody different. And, some of the big boxes were just rough to deal with because if you don't get it on time, don't do this. I'm going to portal you to death for information. Like when you first engage with a shipper, and it's only because I'm kind of unfamiliar here, are they looking at the value prop of grading themselves to be better and do better with the carriers? Or is it, hey, I have so much vendor inbound and it's kind of messy and I want to grade them? Or is it kind of a blend of both? Like, what are you seeing? It's
a mix, but it's usually one or the other. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I've got 16 DCs and, I'm getting a single price from my carriers for some of my carrier contracts, and I'm getting individual carriers pricing facilities differently because they operate differently.
Yeah.
And so for those companies to be able to get, let's from kind of a carrier's perspective of an efficiency, let's get you scorecards on each one, and you can start to gamify it or, whatever you want to do that way. For the folks that have a lot of variety in their inbound traffic, a ton of different suppliers and stuff, also vendor qualification, right now, most distributors, manufacturers, retailers can they send an ASN, and do they deliver on time and in full? And even though it's on their account, they don't look at any other factors that they're paying for. And so kind of rattling that tree, if you will, they're like, I can start to look at my vendor qualifications, existing and future, a lot more effectively. So, yeah.
Now, have you worked with anybody where, and you see this all the time, right? Like if I'm going to grade myself or self-score, I might put myself up here. And then when you let the public audience do it, it comes in here. So like, have you seen that kind of like reality check of, okay, this is real, and I can admit it without, putting my ego in the middle of this and my pride. Like, tell me about that experience.
Yeah, well, a lot of it is because it is data driven, right? Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, you can say, well, no, that dwell time was higher because my driver was, flirting with the dock manager, whatever, Okay, that's fine, and let's say that's true, but really we're looking at, because we are aggregating it and it's constantly being updated. The data is pretty real. That Lake Wobegon Effect, all our children are above average and, and everything. It's that, but we're also trying to show people, hey, here is an average. So just like a credit score, FICO score, nobody knows, okay, is that good or bad? I'm a 340. Is that solid? No, it's but giving some benchmarks to that so they can see, okay, here's where, and even by individual factor. And there are those companies like say, hey, we make ladders. Guess what? Our freight's going to suck always and forever. So they just
have that defeatist attitude. Yeah.
Right. But you can be the best among ladder manufacturers, right?
Yes.
So it's to say, hey, let's look at all these other factors. You're not going to change that. You're always going to be over length, whatever. But let's look at everything else and what you could improve on.
Control your controllables, right? And there's always a good way to do business the right way.
Bingo. And that's really it. So we have a Freight Karma tool for that. again, I'm not that creative, so we just so, okay. We just said, "Hey, you suck. Here's why. Here's how you get better." And the Freight Karma basically gives each shipper very specific little baby steps that they can take to improve their scores. Improve your dwell times, your pickup dwell times by 5 minutes. Your score will go up 30 points. Pay your bills 2 days faster. Your score will go up 50 points. Just little things. So we don't just dump data on them and say, okay, fix it.
How do you kind of view your go to market with this to even penetrate the market to allow them to funnel this data in? Have you had struggles or challenges with that? Because there's a lot of great ideas, right? And execution is the damnedest hardest part of all of it.
Always. And we're just starting to run my face into the wall on that one. We are actively promoting out where we get the switch, and once we get the kind of the final laggard carriers, integrated in and whatnot. We've got a lot of folks that from a carrier community that are going to drive a lot of this. It says, hey, I can give you pricing and I can give you walk-in pricing based on what I know. But if I can check your freight score, your shipper score, I can probably sharpen my pencil because that's going to give me a lot more detail. And so really it's very, as we get out of the primordial ooze startup phase, that's really where we're going. And we've already had conversations with cargo insurance companies, factoring companies, that are all very, very keen on doing the same thing to say, hey, I can give you here's a blank policy, that we just give anybody walking in off the streets. But if I can check your shipper score and I can see, how to fill out a BOL, how to use a freight classification system, your damage claims are, historically low, and getting that directly from the carriers and that as a data source is much more trusted than, from someone else. And, one of the carriers is like, why do you want to get it from me? Why don't you just ask the 3PLs for the data? And I said, so you'd trust data that came from the 3PLs? He's like, all right, fair point. No, it's like, I'm like, it's just the reality of the situation. Right. So that's a big part of what's driving it. So that's kind of the go-to-market. And it's just we just want to make it free and easy and accessible for people to get started and authorize it. And then they can start to use it to look at their own networks and stuff and buy reports as they need to, or whatever it might be.
What does critical mass look like for you, where you think you have to get on a growth factor before we have, your local rep going in there and going, oh, well, you're a 580, so I don't know, if I can give you that, 92% discount that you're asking for, but these are some things, and they have a list of what they need to improve, because I think that's what you're envisioning here very soon. Yeah,
I am. And I think it'll, it may be a year before we get to that point. But I think as soon as some of the carriers adopt it, 3PLs start adopting it on engaging with customers, and being able to say, hey, I can coach you. I found you were a 480, now you're a 670. So let's go back and revisit. Yeah. Or what I really hope to see is that, imagine carriers, tiering some of their pricing. So I can say, hey, for my 500 and above customers, I could do this. And for your lower customers, and really what it comes down to is risk mitigation, right? So right now it's almost like, FAK versus actual class or dim rating or anything else where there's real data versus BS, right? Yeah. It's getting to that next layer of that to say, okay, on this transaction, I can see what these endpoints look like. So let's price accordingly. And hey, as they improve, we can talk about improving. but the carriers may find that, they've priced people at an 800 and turns out they're operating more like a 600. So, the carriers, they've got some defensive position there too. It's not all just, the sky is falling. So
now how do you look at like trending that data, whether it's for improvement or like inversely the account's degrading on performance and I might have to throw a red flag because payments are getting delayed. I'm not getting paid on everything in the same way. Like how does the update cadence work? So like if I come in at a 600, how do I get to an 800? And like, what's that time period look like? Which I know some of it's on me, right? But how do you kind of update that score?
It's so we get updated score data on the regular. I think the most is within like a week. From carrier refresh data. So that's constantly kind of live and affecting. So if you look at, maybe a 30 to 45 day cycle, you ought to see improvement. If it's going to reflect your actions pretty quickly on that. Now, how often people check? We do have alerts. So if you're whether you're a carrier rep or whether you're a shipper with some key vendors, if you have a report that you purchased, we'll monitor that in the background. So if they all of a sudden go up or down by like 30 points, we'll actually send you an alert. Almost like a credit monitoring service. Again, not that creative. But it's be able to say, hey, if something goes way off the rails, we can at least let you know, because you're not monitoring the dock operations of your vendor in Poughkeepsie, right? So that's one of the tools that's already built in now. So
I love that. And I can't wait until you get to that critical mass. So it's like, as I improve, costing got better. And now I'm seeing better pricing in real time with that dynamic pricing prevalence. We know that they're becoming more agile with how they adjust, right? Adjusting down to OR levels and adjusting down to lane levels where they have head hauls and back hauls. So I cannot wait till you see that. And now you're incentivizing behavior.
Yes. And that's the whole point of it, right? That's getting back to the FICO score. That's the whole point of it. We all should be keenly aware of our shipper score, and care about it, because that's what helps keep the carriers efficient. And everybody wins. That's the whole point of it. So
now I'm curious, is FreightFacts is kind of newer, right? Like if my carrier started today, we would be a lot more what I call AI native from a build standpoint. How are you leveraging AI being a newer build, newer company? I know you're a freight nerd, technology nerd like me.
Yeah.
Have you found that really powerful to scale your efforts, aggregate data, how you view data?
Yeah. The reporting capabilities that we're going to be launching out are amazing. Essentially, we can use AI to be able to say, hey, here's the type of reporting I want to see. And you know what? Send it to me like through a chatbot interface and be able to, okay, now schedule that. And then we'll take it off of AI reporting. So you can do iterations to get it right. Now show me these columns. Now mix that up, flip this order, blah, blah, blah. And then just say, publish it now as a scheduled report, and dishes are done. A lot of the prescriptive technology to say, hey, here's what you very personally at this location could do to improve your scores. That's all also using a lot of AI as well. I don't go around swinging AI because you know what? It's a tool, it's a technology and it's a tool, and it doesn't belie a value proposition. It just says, I'm using a screwdriver. Aha. Yeah. To do what? It's.
Yeah. And I think, I get a lot of benefit out of it, right, in the way that I use it. But all it's really doing for me is taking a series of tasks that I would normally do and bundling them up for a level of automation. But it doesn't replace me, it scales me. And so my thought is that it's just helping you scale your efforts so that you can be leaner and meaner and continue down your path to get to critical mass faster.
100%. I agree. I just, it's kind of like everybody. You were old enough back in the day when everyone was something, it was like
the internet revolution, run into the box to get the latest and greatest version of America online.
Right. Downloading. Yeah.
Nobody can call me. Phone line's disconnected. Plug it in the internet right now.
Sorry, dude. I just got DSL.
Yeah. It's going great, man. I love this. Have you gotten to the point to where you're seeing customer success stories or carrier success stories where they've actually been able to turn around, improve a relationship, improve a score, and actually get meaningful gain from this?
No, and the only reason is because we're not live yet. So we launched our pre-registration. The software is done. It works. We've got demo. We got carrier data. We got all this kind of stuff. But we kind of look at this. We get one bite at the apple on this. If we push it out too early and it's crap data or it doesn't sync up with, there's not enough data in there from enough different carriers, it's just going to fall on its face. And this has all been bootstrapped. So we don't have any outside capital pressure on saying, well, you got to rush this to market. So we're not. We're just making the conscious decision to hey, let's do this the right way and make sure everybody gets comfortable with it. And we address all the concerns. So we're getting very, very close now. And, a lot of the carriers have said, hey, do you think this is really cool? But for us to prioritize the integration to you got to go out and get some shippers. Yeah. I'm like, okay, then we'll just go get some shippers. And then the carriers can say, aha, I've got all these shippers now asking for it. We're comfortable then dedicating the time and IT resources to do the integration one time. Yeah. And then we're done. Yeah. So
believe me, I know that from starting in a similar fashion.
Yep.
I was pushing for 8 years and now I'm finally feeling the pull.
Yeah.
It's much better. But I think carriers are recognizing that there's a deficit spot in the market and there's needs for stuff like this. And I cannot wait as this hits the market for me to start saying this. And if I can help in any way, I'm a big fan other than just echoing, your sentiment here and the need for this. But I'm super pumped on what you're doing.
I love it, man. I appreciate that. And I love talking with you anytime. At a show, a bar, a bathroom, whatever. It doesn't matter.
John Denver when I'm half cocked and you're playing harmonica.
It's beautiful. I mean, keys are just recommendations. So yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
So tell me about this. As you launch the product, how, if there's shippers out there that have a lot of vendors or shippers that just want to improve themselves, how do they engage with FreightFacts or even LTL carriers that are hearing this as we unpack it and going, well, this makes a lot more sense to me? Yeah.
Honestly, they pre-register at FreightFacts.io in the website. There's just a link on there. Pre-register for it. There's no credit cards, anything. It just says, hey, as soon as you're ready to go live, you'll get your first 3 reports for free. We've got a bunch of early adopter kind of founding beta users in the 3PL and carrier space that are already there and on board. Like I said, we just want to get it through, or just drop me an email. Yeah, Healy at FreightFacts.io.
So I've got 2 more for you on this that just popped into my head and my ADD brain this way. So sorry, but what does the intake process or implementation look like of this, whether you're carrier or shipper? Is it, you got it down pretty easy?
Yeah. So for the shipper, there isn't any. You're just a consumer. There's no integration required from a shipper. They don't have to feed us any data. They just sign up and then, authorize their carriers to release their data. Once that data is in, they can go in and use it. We've got API hooks if they want to pull it into their business intel or CRM or, TMSs, wherever they want it. That's cool. I'm really curious to see how different people will use it in different ways. But but yeah, that's it for them. So they can start using it like immediately.
I love that you've doubled down on ease of use and convenience, because I think that's a huge missing piece in the market today across several different factors, right? And we can probably sit here for 2 more hours talking about the deficit convenience factor in this industry. But if it's not for, folks like us at My Carrier and folks like you seeing these problems and helping modernize the industry, then it won't move forward. So you have to have trailblazers to go out there and find new areas of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah. And it reminds me, one of my favorite expressions, you know what the pioneers get, right? All the arrows. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can go from pioneer to settler, right? And make that evolutionary transfer without being the ones that get slaughtered. But sometimes you're right. Second place is better than first in some industries. But you said something earlier that kind of caught my eye, and you were like, it was around the 3PL conversation, and it was, are you going to really trust that data? Are you seeing LTL carriers that want to leverage your FreightFacts tool to better grade their 3PL partnerships beyond just, oh, I give you this much revenue and I'm the biggest one, so that makes me the best?
Yeah, and that's a big reason, for another big reason for the carriers to take a look at and say, okay, here are very specific metrics. So we have 2 different scores that come into it, an account score and then a location score. So carriers are able to see from an account score, here's the 3PL that's paying the bills. I know how they operate in terms of days to pay and those types of things. But then at an individual level across all their, individual accounts, even if there's blankets, they can start to look at it across and say, hey, your average score across your book of business is this, and let's get it to this, or vice versa. We can segment it if there's CSP pricing or something specific. They can start to really look at that and dissect it that way as well. So,
is there any component on that side, like, and we see this where shippers, they'll have like a Unishippers account, a Global Trans account, like one account, and like they're feeding the carrier's business, but they're finding the cheapest avenue. Like, is there anything that you do to showcase or scorecard that at all, or is that something that's a thought in the way you're grading the shipper or even the 3PL?
Yeah, so that really applies mostly to the 3PLs, right? Or the shippers, sorry, that are using multiple 3PLs. Yeah. So if their account score isn't their own direct relationships, we can tag that shipper that, yes, this is a 1-star, 1 asterisk. They're using a third party, service. Yeah. Again, because we're aggregating data and anonymizing it, if they use multiple 3PLs, then there's 2 stars, 2 asterisks. So there is an indicator. There's nothing is ever shared on who they're using or what they're using or, any of that information, but it just says, yes, this is their account score is not made up of their own performance, but those of a third party or multiple third parties.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you, we'll wrap this up here. Having you as a peer, but also a personal friend, I can tell the folks out there in the open world, Lance is a man of very high integrity, and it's a good thing that he's in this role because he has to play Switzerland, no different than we do at My Carrier. And protecting your data is of utmost importance, but it's important that we receive data from multiple sources to make the industry better. So leave this, Lance. We'll just shout it out again. Where do they go to find FreightFacts, how they get signed up, and bring it on down, carriers and shippers. Let's make this industry better.
Yeah, amen, brother. Yeah, stop on freightfacts.io. Drop me an email or hit me up on LinkedIn, L Healy at freightfacts.io. Bobby, appreciate it, man. I look forward to finding a way to put our chocolate in your peanut butter.
We'll figure it out, man.
I know we will.
It's a definite need, and as we scale, there's obviously more agnostic data that can feed the beast and make everybody better, and that's the goal. And I want people to know that it's to make the industry and everybody better.
Amen, brother. That's it. It's plenty of work to do.
Thanks, Lance.
All right. Take care, bud. See you.
All right.